On July 4th, 1976, as thousands celebrated the creation of a United States of America, a team of elite Israeli commandos, the Sayeret Matkal, prepared for one of the most perilous missions they had ever known. They were preparing for what could be termed as one of the most dangerous missions of the century. It was a mission which was to be carried out in the heart of Africa, which was thousands of miles away from the borders of Israel, and would leave the dynamics of rescue missions in a state of paradigm shift. The stakes could not have been any higher because the lives of 102 hostages were at stake, that any failure would lead to not just the loss of the hostages, but also leave a window of opportunity for violence and revenge. In addition to being reckless, the plan was also very ambitious, a surgical strike on the enemy's hideout, with no certainty of success. This is the story of Operation Entebbe. Only a week earlier, on June 27, the Air France A147 flight from Athens to Paris was hijacked along with its 248 passengers, 4 armed individuals, 2 Palestinians with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and 2 Germans from the revolutionary cells, hijacked the aircraft and forced the pilots to go to Uganda's Entebbe Airport. The hijackers planned the operation in Entebbe, knowing that there was the backing of Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. Their demands were stated quickly and bluntly: the unconditional release of more than 40 prisoners held in Israel and several other countries, as well as $5 million. If the conditions were not met, they would blow up the plane with the remaining hostages. The message was both unambiguous and terrifying. The hostages' lives depended on Israel's response. Time was short. The ultimatum gave the Israeli cabinet just 48 hours to take a decision that would cost the lives of more than 100 innocent people. The hijacked plane and its 102 hostages landed at Entebbe Airport on 28 June, and all those taken were placed in small, cramped, windowless rooms. The hijackers endeavored to completely disorientate the hostages by separating the Jewish passengers from the others in order to create an atmosphere of psychological terror. As hope fades, the hostages' fear remains constant, just as it was at the beginning of the hijacking, when the weight and uncertainty is at its most trying. On 29th of June, the terrorists decided to release 148 non-Israeli or non-Jewish hostages, keeping only those of Israeli origin or Jewish faith. In Israel, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Defense Minister Shimon Peres were faced with a dilemma: to try to negotiate with the terrorists and expose themselves to other equally terrifying events in the future, or to resort to drastic measures to bring the hostages back safe and sound. Each of the options studied by the Rabin cabinet was accompanied by the awareness that failure to deal with such events would have serious consequences. While the deliberations continue, a dedicated team of Mossad agents and IDF strategists mobilize and gather intelligence on Entebbe Airport, over 3,000 miles away. Every detail counted, from the exact number of hijackers and their weaponry to the layout of the airport and the positioning of Ugandan troops likely to put up resistance. Reconnaissance photos, reports of freed hostages, and plans of the airport terminal formed the backbone of a plan that became increasingly complex as the hours passed. Israeli officials knew they not only had to free the hostages, but also execute the operation with surgical precision. Within hours, the framework of a high-risk rescue began to take shape. The mission required an elite force capable of acting with determination and without the slightest hesitation. A total of 151 of Israel's best-trained soldiers were mobilized. 35 commandos from the Sayeret Matkal for the main assault, 116 paratroopers and infantrymen to provide tactical support, as well as aircrew and rescue personnel. They were all going to take part in Operation Thunderbolt. Yonatan Netanyahu, the brother of current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was selected to lead the operation. He was a charismatic 30-year-old lieutenant colonel, renowned for his calm under pressure and his unwavering loyalty to his country. For Mr. Netanyahu, this mission was more than a tactical operation. It was a personal and national commitment to protect his people, whatever the risks involved. His team trained relentlessly, analyzing every entry point and memorizing the plans in minute detail. Using model terminals, they endlessly rehearsed every move, practicing how to neutralize the hijackers and evacuate the hostages with formidable speed and precision. On 3 July, just before midnight, 4 C-130 Hercules aircraft took off from Israel, flying low over the Red Sea to avoid detection. The soldiers huddled in their seats are armed and ready, but the hours ahead are filled with uncertainty. They must trust each other and their training, but doubts remain as many fear they may never return. Entebbe is a fortress, with Ugandan soldiers posted around the airport. Their approach has to be perfect. Otherwise, the hijackers can start killing the hostages even before the Commandos reach the terminal. When the planes landed in Entebbe just after midnight, the Commandos quickly disembarked. A black Mercedes limousine led the way, flanked by 2 Land Rovers, a strategic choice to imitate the typical motorcade of Ugandan dictator Idi Amin and give the team precious seconds of camouflage. But unfortunately, before they had even reached the entrance to the terminal, a Ugandan soldier tried to inspect the convoy. The Israeli Special Forces shot him dead, marking the start of the assault. They advanced towards the disused terminal, eliminating all the Ugandan soldiers in their path. As they entered the building, the Commandos shouted orders in Hebrew for the hostages to lie on the ground, identifying those who spoke Hebrew as hostages and the others as kidnappers. They advanced towards the disused terminal, eliminating all the Ugandan soldiers in their path. As they entered the building, the Commandos shouted orders in Hebrew for the hostages to lie on the ground, identifying those who spoke Hebrew as hostages and the others as kidnappers. Inside, intense gunfire erupted and chaos reigned as the Israeli Commandos tried to neutralize the kidnappers while protecting the hostages. Orders came down in Hebrew for the hostages to lie on the ground, but the panic and confusion complicated the situation. The flashes of gunfire illuminated the darkness of the terminal, where the shouts and the crash of gunfire mingled in an atmosphere of extreme tension. In the confusion, some of the hostages got up, and it was then that the drama began. Jean-Jacques Mimouni, Pascal Cohen, and Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Netanyahu were fatally wounded, caught in the deluge of bullets. The Commandos killed the hostage-takers in a matter of minutes, but the loss of these innocent civilians and of Yonatan Netanyahu, who was wounded in the action, left a painful mark on the assault. The operation was a success for the majority of the hostages, but this sacrifice leaves a poignant reminder of the daring and risks inherent in this rescue mission. The freed hostages were then escorted by the Commandos to the waiting C-130 aircraft, urging them to board quickly. Some hostages, dazed and exhausted, still couldn't believe they were being rescued. After days in captivity, their state of shock was mixed with immense relief when they felt safe on the planes for the first time. With the wheels of the planes off the runways at Entebbe, Operation Thunderbolt was over. In the space of 90 minutes, Israel had succeeded in carrying out a military operation that will surely go down as one of the bravest and most complex rescues in history. The planes returning to Israel were greeted by shouts, cries of joy, and solemn tributes to the dead hostages and to Yonatan Netanyahu, a hero whose story of sacrifice was now the pride of all. The mission was later named Operation Entebbe, in memory of the acts of bravery that took place that night and the lives that were lost during the operation. The operation would inspire generations to come about what can be achieved against all odds. For Israel and the rest of the world, Operation Entebbe has become much more than a simple rescue. It symbolizes the spirit of a nation willing to cross the unknown to protect its people, a mission forged in courage, precision, and sacrifice, which has become a universal emblem of determination and bravery. Subscribe to Black Files and you won't miss our next episode on the incredible story of the world's first special forces, the legendary British SAS.